My name is Hallie. I'm 35 years old. And the night of my birthday dinner at Romano's Steakhouse, my twin sister announced she was pregnant with my husband's baby. But before I tell you how one single document destroyed their entire world and sent my husband to federal prison, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because this story gets absolutely wild. You know that feeling when your whole life just shifts? Like you're standing on solid ground 1 second. And the next you're falling through space? That's exactly what happened to me 8 weeks before that birthday dinner. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me paint you the picture of who we were first. Growing up, my twin sister Sophie and I couldn't have been more different. We looked identical. Same blonde hair, same blue eyes, same everything on the outside. But inside, Sophie was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. When she wanted that $3,000 Vera Wang dress for senior prom, my parents liquidated their vacation fund without blinking. When I needed help paying for my medical school textbooks, I got a lecture about financial responsibility and a suggestion to get a weekend job at Target. I was always the responsible one, the steady one, the one who fixed everyone else's problems. Sophie was the free spirit, the dreamer, the one who somehow always landed on her feet no matter how badly she messed up. And believe me, she messed up a lot. Failed college twice, maxed out credit cards, moved back home at 28 because she couldn't hold down a job. But somehow, in my parents' eyes, it was all just Sophie being Sophie. Then there was my husband, David. We'd been married for 7 years, and from the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. He was a senior financial analyst at Morrison & Associates, one of the biggest investment firms in the city. 6-figure salary, corner office, the whole 9 yards. Me? I was a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital, working 12-hour shifts because I genuinely loved helping kids get better. But here's what nobody knew. David and I had been trying to have a baby for almost 4 years. 4 years of negative pregnancy tests. 4 years of my heart breaking a little more each month. 4 years of watching every friend around me get pregnant while I stayed empty. It was eating me alive, but I kept it together because that's what I do. I'm the one who holds everything together. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. I remember it was Tuesday because I'd just finished a brutal overnight shift, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. But Sophie had called in tears, again, saying she was being evicted from her apartment because she'd spent her rent money on some get-rich-quick scheme that fell through. Classic Sophie. So instead of sleeping, I drove across town to help her pack. Again, David wasn't thrilled, but he never said anything directly. He'd just get this look, this subtle eye roll whenever Sophie's name came up. Looking back now, I realized that look meant something completely different than what I thought. I got to Sophie's apartment, and honestly, it was a disaster. Empty wine bottles everywhere, unpaid bills scattered across the kitchen counter, clothes thrown around like a tornado had hit. But what caught my attention was her laptop sitting open on the coffee table, and the screen was showing an email thread. The subject line made my blood freeze. Our little secret is growing. Now. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something in my gut told me to look. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was just exhaustion making me paranoid. But I clicked on that email thread, and what I saw made me physically sick. It was a conversation between Sophie and David. Months of messages. Intimate messages. Messages that made it clear they'd been having an affair for almost a year. But the last email in the chain was what shattered my world completely. Sophie had written, "The test came back positive. I'm 8 weeks along. This is perfect timing. Hallie's birthday dinner is in 2 months. We can announce it then. And she'll be so devastated she won't fight the divorce. You know how she gets when she's upset? She just shuts down. We can take everything and start fresh. David had replied, "Brilliant. My lawyer says if we can prove emotional instability, we can get the house, the savings, everything. This baby is going to set us up for life." I stared at that screen for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll. These weren't just two people having an affair. This was a calculated plan to destroy me financially and emotionally. They weren't just betraying me. They were planning to humiliate me publicly and then steal everything I'd worked for. The worst part? They thought they knew me so well. They thought I'd just crumble and disappear quietly. The same way I'd always handled conflict in our family, by being the bigger person, by keeping the peace, by sacrificing my own needs for everyone else's comfort. But something shifted in me in that moment. Something cold and sharp and absolutely furious. I quietly closed the laptop, helped Sophie pack her boxes like nothing had happened, and drove home in complete silence. When David asked how it went, I just smiled and said, "Oh, Sophie, same old drama." That night, while David slept peacefully next to me, probably dreaming about his new life with my sister and their baby, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in my life, I started planning something that wasn't meant to help other people. I was going to destroy them both. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. David was already in the shower, humming some tune like he didn't have a care in the world, like he wasn't planning to destroy my life in 8 weeks. I made him his usual coffee, black, 2 sugars, and watched him drink it while scrolling through his phone, probably texting my sister about their perfect little plan. "You seem different today," he said, looking at me over his coffee mug. "More, I don't know, energetic." I smiled sweetly. "Just feeling good, I guess. Maybe it's the spring weather." If only he knew that what he was seeing wasn't energy. It was rage crystallizing into something much more dangerous. Purpose. The moment David left for work, I called in sick to the hospital. First time in 3 years I'd used a personal day for something other than helping Sophie out of another mess. My supervisor was shocked but understanding. "You never take time for yourself. Hallie, rest up." Rest was the last thing on my mind. I had investigating to do. First stop, my laptop. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal, and that meant diving deep into our finances. See, David thought he was so smart with his fancy finance degree. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd added me as an authorized user on all his accounts when we got married. For transparency. Ironic, isn't it? I spent 4 hours going through 7 years of bank statements, credit card bills, and investment accounts. What I found made my stomach turn. The affair hadn't started recently. It had been going on for almost 2 years. I could trace it through the evidence: unexplained cash withdrawals, restaurant charges in parts of town we never went to together, hotel room charges on nights when David claimed he was working late. But the real smoking gun? A recurring monthly payment of $1,500 to something called Sunrise Properties, LLC. I'd never heard of it, but a quick Google search revealed it was a property management company. The same company that managed Sophie's apartment complex. David had been paying my sister's rent for 2 years. My hands were literally trembling as I kept digging. There were transfers to jewelry stores, a charge at Victoria's Secret for $400 on our anniversary. Except I never received any Victoria's Secret gifts that day. He'd given me a $20 drugstore candle and said money was tight at work. The final piece that made me physically ill? A charge for $3,500 to Oakwood Fertility Clinic. The same clinic where David and I had gone for initial consultations 3 years ago, Except this charge was dated just 6 months ago, and I had never set foot in that clinic again after our first visit. Sophie had been getting fertility treatments, with our money, to get pregnant with my husband. I took screenshots of everything, created a secure folder on my cloud drive, and then did something that surprised even me. I called my brother Jake. Jake was 5 years older than Sophie and me, worked as a cybersecurity specialist for the government, and had always been the family member who saw through Sophie's manipulation. "Hallie, everything okay? You never call during work hours." "Jake, I need your help with something, and I need you to keep it completely confidential." "What's going on?" I told him everything. The emails, the financial evidence, the pregnancy announcement planned for my birthday. There was silence on the other end for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, "Jesus Christ, Hallie, I always knew Sophie was selfish, but this is sociopathic. What do you need?" "I need to know if there's more. If David's hiding other accounts, other assets. Can you help me find out what I can't see? Send me everything you've got. Give me 48 hours." While Jake worked his magic on the digital front, I decided to do some old-fashioned detective work. I drove to Sophie's apartment complex and had a very interesting conversation with Mrs. Chen, the sweet elderly woman who worked in the leasing office. "Oh yes, your sister's rent is always paid on time," she said with a smile. "That nice gentleman who comes by every month is so responsible. Such a good brother-in-law to help family like that." "Brother-in-law?" I asked, my heart pounding. "The tall man with the dark hair?" He said he was Sophie's brother-in-law when he set up the automatic payments. Very polite. Always asks how Sophie is doing. David had been playing house with my sister for 2 years, and he was comfortable enough to introduce himself as family to strangers. My next stop was even more revealing. I drove to David's office building and waited in the parking garage. I knew his schedule. Tuesday lunch meetings always ran long, usually until 2:30. At exactly 2:45, I watched David walk out of the building with his colleague Marcus, laughing about something, but instead of getting in his car to come home, David walked 3 blocks to the Marriott downtown, and guess who was waiting for him in the lobby, wearing a dress I'd never seen before? My loving twin sister. I followed them at a distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. They went up to the elevator, David's hand on the small of Sophie's back in a gesture that was so familiar it made me nauseous. I'd seen him touch me that same way thousands of times. I waited in the lobby for 2 hours. When they came back down, Sophie's hair was different, and David was checking his watch. They kissed goodbye. Not a quick peck, but a long, comfortable kiss of 2 people who'd done this many, many times before. That night, David came home and told me his lunch meeting had run late, and then he'd had to deal with a difficult client. He kissed my forehead and asked what was for dinner, just like always. I made his favorite meal, chicken parmesan, and watched him eat it while telling me about his stressful day at work. Every bite he took, every casual lie that rolled off his tongue, every time he looked me in the eye and pretended to be the devoted husband, it was all building something inside me that I'd never felt before. Pure, cold, calculating fury. That's when Jake called back. "Hallie, you need to sit down for this." "I'm already sitting. How bad is it?" "It's not just bad. It's criminal. David has 3 accounts you don't know about. 1 offshore account in the Cayman Islands with $420,000 in it. 1 domestic investment account with another $200,000. And here's the kicker. He's been systematically transferring money from his corporate expense account to these hidden accounts for the past 18 months. How much money are we talking about? Total? Just over $800,000. Hallie, this isn't just adultery and fraud. This is embezzlement on a federal level. The amounts and the offshore account make this a federal crime. I felt the last piece of my old life crumble away. This wasn't just about an affair or even a betrayal. David had been stealing from his company, stealing enough money to disappear and start fresh with Sophie and their baby. They weren't just planning to humiliate me, they were planning to vanish. Jake, I need you to document everything. Screenshots, account numbers, transaction histories, everything. Already done. I've also taken the liberty of sending copies to a secure server that David can't access even if he somehow finds out what we're doing. Hallie, you need to take this to the FBI. This isn't just personal anymore. But I had a different plan. The FBI would arrest David. Sure, but that would be too quick. Too clean. David and Sophie thought they were so smart, so careful, so superior to the dumb wife who would just roll over and take it. They had no idea they were about to learn the difference between being clever and being intelligent. I was going to let them have their moment of triumph at my birthday dinner. Let them think they'd won. Let them make their announcement and wait for me to crumble. And then I was going to hand them a gift that would destroy not just their future, but their past and present too. Because the beautiful thing about federal crimes is that they don't just disappear, they follow you forever. I smiled as I hung up with Jake. 7 weeks until my birthday dinner, 7 weeks to set up the perfect trap. 7 weeks felt like 7 years, but also like 7 minutes. Every day, I played the perfect wife. I made David's coffee, asked about his day, smiled when he kissed me goodbye. Meanwhile, Jake and I built an airtight case that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. The hardest part wasn't pretending I didn't know. It was watching Sophie play the loving sister. She'd call me crying about her mystery illness, asking me to come over with soup and ginger ale for her stomach bug. I'd sit there, stroking her hair while she fake-retched into a bowl, knowing she was actually experiencing morning sickness from carrying my husband's child. "You're such a good sister, Hallie," she'd whisper, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. 3 weeks before my birthday, David started acting different, more attentive, more guilty. He brought me flowers, just because. Started doing dishes without being asked. Even suggested we take a weekend trip to Napa Valley. "We should celebrate you more," he said one evening, pulling me close on the couch. "I feel like I've been taking you for granted. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have been touched. Instead, I recognized it for what it was. His conscience trying to ease the guilt before he destroyed my life. He was love-bombing me before the execution, 2 weeks before my birthday. Sophie announced she had wonderful news to share at my party. She was glowing, practically vibrating with excitement as she helped me plan the guest list. "Make sure you invite everyone important," she kept saying. "This is going to be a night no one will ever forget." She was right about that, just not in the way she thought. 1 week before my birthday, I had my final meeting with Jake. We sat in a secure government facility downtown, surrounded by enough evidence to put David away for 15 to 20 years. "The FBI wants to arrest him now," Jake said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "This is the most comprehensive financial fraud case they've seen in years. Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, tax evasion. David hit the federal crime bingo card." "Just a few more days," I said, my voice steady. "I want them to have their moment. I want Sophie to announce that pregnancy in front of everyone we know. I want David to think he's won." Jake stared at me for a long moment. "You know this is going to destroy your parents too," right? Mom invested in one of David's opportunities last year. She could lose her retirement. That hit me harder than I expected. But then I remembered something Sophie had said weeks ago about our parents. Finally learning to appreciate smart investments. She'd been in on that too. Then they need to know what kind of people they raised, I said quietly. The night of my 35th birthday arrived with perfect October weather. Romano's steakhouse had been decorated beautifully, white flowers, soft lighting, exactly the kind of elegant setup Sophie had insisted on. 43 people were there, family, friends, David's colleagues, my hospital coworkers, everyone I cared about, gathered to witness what my sister thought would be my public humiliation. I wore my best dress, a black Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress that David had always loved. I wanted to look perfect for my own resurrection. The dinner was beautiful. David played the doting husband perfectly, keeping my wine glass full, his hand on my shoulder, telling everyone how lucky he was to have me. Sophie sat across from us, practically glowing with anticipation, her hand resting on her still flat stomach in a gesture only I understood. At exactly 9:30, Sophie stood up and tapped her wine glass. The room fell silent. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice carrying that mix of excitement and false nervousness she'd perfected over the years. "Something that's going to change everything for our family." She paused dramatically, looking directly at me with what I can only describe as predatory satisfaction. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice ringing through the restaurant. "And David is the father." The gasps were audible. Forks clattered against plates. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. David sat frozen beside me, his face a mask of fake shock and concern. "We've been in love for 2 years," Sophie continued, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "We tried to fight it, but some things are just meant to be. David and I are going to be a family now." She looked at me expectantly, waiting for the breakdown, the tears, the public collapse that would give them the justification they needed for everything that came next. Instead, I smiled. I stood up slowly, picked up my wine glass, and looked around the room at all the shocked faces of our friends and family. "Well," I said, my voice calm and clear, "I suppose this is as good a time as any to share my news, too." I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Jake had given it to me that morning, sealed and ready. "Sophie, David, I want to thank you," I said, opening the envelope. "You've given me the most incredible gift, the truth. And since we're sharing truths tonight, I thought I'd share a few of my own." I pulled out the first document, a bank statement showing the offshore account. This is David's secret account in the Cayman Islands, $420,000 that he embezzled from Morrison and Associates over the past 18 months. David's face went white. He started to stand, but I continued. "And this," I said, pulling out the fertility clinic records, "shows that Sophie has been receiving fertility treatments for 6 months, paid for with money David stole from his company. Money that also paid for her apartment, her car, and that beautiful dress she's wearing tonight." Sophie's triumphant expression crumbled into pure terror. "And this," I continued, pulling out the final document, "is a federal arrest warrant. You see, while you two were planning my public humiliation, I was working with the FBI to build a case against you for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." The restaurant had gone completely silent except for my mother's quiet sobbing. "The agents are waiting outside," I said, looking directly at David. "They wanted to give us this moment together as a family before they arrested you. David lurched to his feet. You can't. This is. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice still steady. I understand that you've been stealing from your company for 18 months. I understand that you've been having an affair with my sister for 2 years. I understand that you plan to announce her pregnancy at my birthday dinner to humiliate me into a quick divorce where you could take everything I've worked for. I turned to Sophie, who was now openly weeping. And Sophie, since you're so excited about your pregnancy, I thought you should know. I called your ex-boyfriend Ryan yesterday. He's very interested to learn about the timeline of your relationship with David. Something about how the dates don't quite add up the way you told David they did. Sophie's face went from white to green in about 2 seconds. The beautiful thing about federal crimes, I continued, addressing the entire room now, is that they don't just disappear. David will be going to federal prison for 15 to 20 years. His assets will be seized to repay Morrison and Associates. And Sophie, well, I'm sure Ryan will be very interested in a paternity test. As if on cue, 2 FBI agents appeared at the restaurant entrance. The room erupted in chaos as David tried to run and Sophie collapsed into her chair, hyperventilating. But I just stood there, calm and still, watching 7 years of lies crumble in real time. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment overlooking the harbor, watching the sunrise over the water. David was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. The paternity test confirmed what I suspected. Ryan was the father, and Sophie had been playing both men against each other for months. My parents lost their retirement savings. But honestly, they're better off knowing who their daughters really are. My mother calls me every week now, apologizing and trying to rebuild our relationship. Sophie moved across the country and hasn't spoken to any of us since the trial. As for me, I'm learning pottery. I've been promoted to head nurse in pediatrics. And last month I started dating Marcus, ironically, David's former colleague who testified against him in court. I have a small garden on my balcony where I grow orchids. There's something beautiful about taking something that looks dead and nursing it back to life. It reminds me that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so beautiful that their betrayal becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to David and Sophie. The truth is, I don't feel guilty at all. I didn't destroy their lives. I just stopped letting them destroy mine. And that, my friends, made all the difference. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments what moment surprised you the most. And if you want to hear more stories about people who turn their worst betrayals into their greatest victories, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.